Hi, and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to talk about my top 10 books of the year. If I look at this list, all of these books are books that I've read in the second half of the year. I went back and I looked over my Goodreads. I looked through the different books that I'd read, and nothing that I read in the beginning of the year really jumped out at me as a really compelling book, which I find a bit sad and I hope is different for 2022. What I had been doing at that time was I'd gone through my Goodreads TBR and added and found all of the books I could that had ebook versions through my library and just had been reading those, just working my way through that list. Nothing compelling, no other reason than that. So that might be one of the reasons. My top 10 books don't start showing up until I start reading through the SEASL list, which I do in the summer. Another thing that I've noticed about this particular list is that most of these are middle grades and YA. In fact, all but one are middle grades and YA. There's no nonfiction on this list. I did not read a lot of nonfiction this year, which is different for me. I really want to get back to reading some more nonfiction. That's an idea for another video. So I'm going to go through my top 10, and most of these books I actually don't have physically with me. A couple of them are in my classroom library. Of course, I'm home on break and I'm not about to go back into the school to get them. The others, I actually just made the purchase, and so they haven't arrived yet and won't for a few days. I've decided to start ordering my books through bookshop.com instead of Amazon so that local bookstores can get the benefit of it. Now, the top 10. I'm gonna go in order. It was really hard to rank them, but I think I settled on something that I'm comfortable with. I have 8 things that I'm gonna talk about. I do have a top 10, but that's because one of my 8 is actually 3 books. So I'll get to that in a minute. So number 8 on the list is The Light in Hidden Places by Sharon Cameron. And this is one of the books that I have in my classroom library. It was actually the first book that I read on the SEASL list, and it completely took me off guard with the ending. It's gritty, it's raw, it's real. And I loved how Sharon Cameron really exposed the characters and their real life struggles and the realities of what it was like to try to just survive in Nazi-occupied Poland. When the thing that really sealed the deal for me about this book was the ending, and actually the author's note. Now, I won't say anything about that because, again, that's what sealed the deal for me. And it struck me to my core, and it's definitely one of those World War II fiction books that I will definitely recommend. Number 7 is one that I absolutely loved, and that is Efren Divided. So Efren Divided, again, was another one of those SEASL books. I think one of the reasons that I resonated with it so much is because I saw so many of my former students in that. Having taught at a Title I school with the largest Latinx population in my state, it was a similar struggle, not exactly the same because this story takes place in San Diego. And the border is really pivotal in this story. But I resonated, and then Cisneros tells Efren's story. He lays bare the realities of what it is like to be the child of undocumented immigrants and what he has to deal with and how quickly he has to grow up to take care of his younger twin siblings, to deal with school things, and then the deportation of his mother, and how that splits the family apart in ways that he didn't even imagine. And I found it absolutely beautiful and heartbreaking. Number 6 is Ophie's Ghosts. Ophie's Ghosts really struck me in a way that I did not expect. I thought that Justina Ireland did an amazing job with how she created the character of Ophie and the struggles that, the real struggles that Ophie felt and had to deal with in her and her mother's migration to Pittsburgh. Part of the Great Migration, something that a lot of people don't know a lot about, talk a lot about, and then to tie that in with a little bit of root magic and a little bit of seeing ghosts and dealing with that story and what happens with the ghost that she's dealing with the most throughout this story. It dealt with what some people would consider fantastical in a very real way, and I absolutely loved it and wish that it had gone on to the final round of the Goodreads Choice Award. At number 5, we get that 3-book set that will make it up to my top 10 books, and that is The Ember in the Ashes. An Ember in the Ashes I read a couple years ago. It's the first book in the series, and the last book in the quartet is the one that was on the Goodreads Choice Award for YA Fantasy, A Sky Beyond the Storm. Because I wanted to read all of those, obviously I was going to read the series, and I fell in love with these characters in a way that I just did not expect. Sabaa Tahir did an amazing job with creating complex characters, an intricate magic system, a really compelling and expanding world, and even not humanizing, but I guess it's the word that I'll use for lack of a better term, humanizing the Jinn, humanizing the Nightbringer. Even though he's not human, he's Jinn. He's the villain. You understood the villain. You didn't empathize with him, but you understood him and her reasons, and Sabaa Tahir's reasons for giving him a perspective, a point of view. The only thing that I did not like about this series was the Commandant. And I felt that Sabaa Tahir's explanation of her character and her reasonings for how she became what she became incredibly unfulfilling, unsatisfactory. But beyond that, how everything wrapped up in that final book, oh, I loved it. I thought she did such an amazing job with that. So that's my number 5. Moving into the top half of my list, we have a book that I actually have a physical copy of. This is a book that surprised me. This is the only adult fiction. This is literary fiction. And it's a book that has been on my TBR for years. I put this book on my TBR in 2012. I think because it was longlisted or shortlisted for the Man Booker Prize. And that year I thought, oh, I'll read these. I never really did, except for I read this one. And now I understand why this book earned so many awards, was shortlisted or longlisted for the Man Booker Prize. I remember finishing this book and just sitting there I just finished an amazing book. I don't know that I can move back into real life. It's a feeling that a lot of non-readers probably wouldn't get. I mean, think about if you finish an amazing series, like movies or TV show. It's not even nearly the same. But Aang really explored the complicated nuances of life, dealing with trauma inflicted by war, trauma inflicted by love, by deception, by the threat of loss of memory. It's a complicated, beautiful story. It's not what I typically read, but it makes me so glad that I knew that this was on my TBR and I picked it up at that book sale for the library that we had back in August. This is a fantastic book. Number 3 is the book that got my vote in the first round of the Goodreads Choice Award, and that is Root Magic by Eden Royce. This book grabbed me from the very beginning and did not let go. At first, one of the things that I appreciated was the fact that it was set in the Sea Islands of South Carolina, my home state, and that it talked about the Gullah Geechee culture, which I had recently become reacquainted with through my student teacher. And that was the initial hook that got me in. But then the way that Royce dealt with, like, wove in root magic, she clearly knows what she's talking about. I thought that the way that she combined the real history of what happened in that time period with root magic, not something that I have any sort of familiarity to, any sort of claim to say whether it was accurate or not. I mean, just look at me. But she dug into the sibling relationship between the two characters, the main character and her twin brother. She dug into the parental relationship between the main character and her mother. She dug into the friendship relationship that turned into something that could have been grotesque, but turned into something incredibly beautiful. And I know that I struggled to put into words how much what I loved about these books. I just keep gushing and saying that they're amazing. So I absolutely adored root magic. Number 2 is the other book that I have physically, and that is Raybearer. So this is the gorgeous Illumicrate edition. So I read Raybearer as part of the Murphy's Discord read along, I guess you could say, and I had no idea what to expect. Jordan Ifueko blew me away. Tarsai is such a complex, nuanced main character. She longs for her mother's love, who is known as the lady. And yet she also longs for a family. And then she is sent to gain this family, only to tear it apart. That is her purpose. Her mother says, I'm going to send you to this place to gain this family, but the reason that I'm sending you to gain this family, and you need to gain this found family, is to tear it apart. Tarsai struggles so much with that throughout this book. It's so gorgeous. I love the relationships between the characters. Her friendship, her romantic relationship, her found family. I don't have enough good words to say about this. This is one of the best books that I have ever read. And I'm saying this about my number 2 book. So yeah, this is my number 2 book for the year. Absolutely amazing. And I really, really, really hope that Redemptor is way up there as well. My number 1 book. It's a book that is in my classroom library. It's a book that from the moment that I started reading it, I knew there was something different, something special about this book. I knew that what Kwame Mbalia had done with this book was something incredible. And that is Tristan Strong Punches a Hole in the Sky. I just cannot stop talking about it. It was incredible. So it has all those tropes of the Percy Jackson book. It is a Rick Riordan Presents book. It's part of that imprint. But I feel like it transcends that idea, that I can't even think of the word. It goes above it. Tristan is a complicated character. He's dealing with a lot. He's dealing with trauma. He's dealing with guilt. He's dealing with learning so much that he didn't know before and wondering about all of that. And then the thing that sealed the deal for me, the thing that made this the best book of the year for me, was the reveal of who the Haint was at the end. I will say nothing. And it's going to make talking about the other books in the series, which I hope to read in 2022, it's going to make talking about them difficult. But the reveal of the identity of that Haint at the end, I gasped out loud. When that was brought to light, literally gasped. And all these pieces start coming together in my mind. And things start making sense here, there, all of these threads that Kwame Mbalia is pulling together. He's like Anansi himself. Anansi's a spider god. It's incredible. It blew my mind. I went into the school year talking to one of the ELA teachers, and I told her, have you read this? It's amazing. Our kids need to read this. It is one of the best books that I have ever read, obviously. It's number 1 this year. It's incredible. And I'm so thankful that Rick Riordan put his name recognition, his privilege behind the Rick Riordan imprints so that a book like this could be told by that person who told it in such an amazing way that you cannot help but be drawn in and completely hooked. So there's my top 10 of the year. I have no idea what next year is going to look like. I've got a lot of ideas. I've got a lot of plans. I don't know if I'm going to actually meet any of those goals. That's for another video. So let me know in the comments what you think about any of these books. Have you read them? What were your best books of the year? I would love to discuss these with you in the comments. And until the next time.